as interesting it is to be, a Brit looking at our elections, you've got to obviously wonder sometime what it is like someone else looking at our, elections. Instead, I know I have a bit of a European audience, so I see the comments. I see what you're saying about our elections. I know we've got what at this point 2 weeks to go ish still, but remember what Thursday in a week's time we'll be voting. Next Saturday will be the last good morning walk, potentially under a Conservative government. The one after that will be the immediate one under a new government. Won't things feel wonderful at that point? We can be like, hallelujah. Of course, as I said, things won't change immediately, of course. But how does this feel for other countries? And especially countries going through similar alt-right turns or right-wing populist turns themselves. How does this feel looking in on their, government to how it's going on here? And The Guardian recently did a panel that they had of, hey, what do you think to the UK elections? What do you think's going on? And of course, looking at your own country as well. So we're just going to go over some, and there is a pattern here you will pick up. There is a very clear pattern here you will pick up. And it's something that has been talked about before. Never ever think that your country won't fall to right-wing populism. I know Ireland, that seems to be the prevailing wisdom, that a right-wing government could never happen in Ireland. But as much as, you had the comedy gold fiasco, if the right leader came along, it could happen. So never ever fall for it couldn't happen in your country, because it always could. You never know what, the next 5 years could bring. Remember, in 2019, the Conservatives were talking about a decade of conservative prosperity and how wonderful that was always going to be. And they would rule for the next decade almost unchallenged. Here we are almost at the next general election, and the Conservatives are staring defeat in the face, potentially even oblivion. And that is just 5 years. A lot can change very, very quickly. So at least take that lesson to heart if that's the only thing you take from this video. But before we do go looking at some of these different views of the UK elections from other countries, please do remember to click on the like, share, and subscribe button. And of course, down below, there are links to my Patreon page, the one-off donation link called Buy Me Coffee, the YouTube thank you button, and of course, as always, there is the Pony Club down below as well. So let's crack on into this then. So the first one comes from a German correspondent. So this is what they've got to say. So, for a German audience currently staring with disbelief at the upsurge, shall we say, of far-right populism in its own doorstep, the British elections are now currently mostly a reminder of where the destructive cluelessness of of populist politicians can lead a country. Nothing you want to look at too closely when you are potentially just at the beginning of such a turn of events yourself. So that's Germany. It's very likely Germany could end up maybe having its own flirt with populism as well. And that could, of course, do a lot of destructive things. It does seem that we are about to buck all of that, especially what is going on largely at the moment in Europe. But seems to be the trend, governments fail, along comes the populist right, they actually get in, they fail spectacularly, and then it goes back to sort of business as usual. But you have to then deal with all the damage that they've done. We'll get onto the Polish reporter later, who says roughly the same thing. Anyway, on to the onto the Spanish version of this. So she has this to say. A few weeks ago, I interviewed James Hall, a British commentator I once saw on Broadway playing Falconer among Mark Ryan's. He was on his final days of permission to work in the EU due to the Brexit rules and spoke about the missing opportunities of singing around Europe. It was maddening bureaucracy and saddening of the British musicians are no longer part of a continental community. Labour has at least promised to try and ease these rules for touring musicians, and Hall does hope that this would change with Keir Starmer. But talking to him, something seemed to be broken beyond disrepair. The limited opportunities at home mean that Hall is now singing less and less and seeking alternative employment as a teacher. So, does seem to be, one of the things that a lot of Europeans are talking about. Brexit, the German person mentioned it as well, but like I say, we're not going to go through it all, but they mentioned it as well. In fact, all three, and like I say, the Polish one at the moment will mention that as well as the Italian one. That is something that is coming up as well. But again, something else she mentions as well. The tone of this election campaign is more civil, less polarized, and more policy balanced than we see in Spain. At the time, debate and interviews occur with a contrasted framework and an acceptance of truths. Net migration is bad, and everyone is tired of Brexit. Pollsters and political experts keep telling me Brexit is no longer the main political concern, an explanation for why candidates and the journalists interviewing them talk so little about it. So, again, not too familiar with Spanish politics, but I get the sense there. The tone of this, general election campaign, at least more civil. I'm surprised it's very civil. I'm very surprised it's a lot more civil. I thought this would have been a very, very dirty campaign. That turned out not to be true. So, hey, we'll give that. That's very, very true for this. So this is the, I believe, so this is the Italian that says this. This is kind of an interesting one from Italy, saying, I've covered several election campaigns here in the UK and abroad, but I have never seen anything duller than this one. I mean, he might see it as dull, but I've been absolutely flabbergasted by how fun this is to see the absolute shambolic falling to pieces of the Tory campaign machine. I did only video yesterday. I can't believe this is happening. And bear in mind, we've got 2 more weeks. What on earth could happen in those 2 more weeks? And as people have commented, hey, you may be back in 2 or 3 weeks' time doing a video and be like, oh my God, what happened this week? Of course, Betgate still rolling on, rumbling on, potentially still rumours people higher up in the Tory party might have been caught up in this. Whether those rumours pan out, we wait to see. But hey, there could be some interesting people maybe trotted out in the next couple of days who have been quite naughty boys. But anyway, he continues. The Tories are now destined to collapse after 14 tempestuous, sometimes scandalous years. Rishi Sunak, a pragmatic prime minister who toned down the hostile rhetoric and improved relations with the EU, has promised several tax cuts and more benefits for pensioners. Nevertheless, talking with voters on the campaign trail, there is now a persistent chunks of the Conservative base that say they wouldn't vote for the Tories this time, not even if they got their national insurance slashed by 70%. And that's it. What are these disaffected Tories going to do? Some are going to go vote for reform. Some are going to vote for Labour or the Lib Dems, and some just aren't going to vote at all. The right-wing vote is split in 3 very significant ways of vote reform, stay home, or vote Labour or Lib Dem. So the right-wing vote has been thoroughly broken in this general election. And bear in mind, this could just be Maybe it's just this election. Who knows? We wait to see what will happen at the next general election, after this one. But I don't think things have maybe calmed down. But hey, we wait and see. In another 5 years' time, I may be right, I may be wrong. Who knows? 5 years is a long time to sort of try and predict things in British politics. But anyway, that's at least the Italian view of a dull, very dull campaign. But hey, each to their own. I would disagree, but it's been very fun to watch for me. But hey, each to their own. And then this is the oh no, this is the Australian one. Oh, so not Australian, Austria. Sorry. So this is the Austrian one. So after Boris Johnson got Brexit done, feverish Austrian interest in Britain died down. When Brexit turned out to be what in Vienna we call a Rohrkrepierer, a dud, a tiny bit of at least shameful but quite delicious Schadenfreude kept my readers going for a bit. With a medium-sized country with neither partners nor plans, only mildly now newsworthy. So that's how, of course, it is going on here. But mentions, of course, the Austrian far right. So Farage is now arguably a lesser threat to democracy than the Austria's far-right Freedom Party, but he does deserve our attention for a far different reason. He could be a hugely disastrous to the Tories. If the Conservative Party does need a new leader after a painful defeat, the radicalised populist right wing around Sir Ola Braverman and Jacob Rees-Mogg could try and crown the Reform UK leader. We've talked about this before. A lot of people do see that. A lot of people do see that as potentially what could happen. It all depends who is left after the waters have receded after this tidal wave of an election that's about to crash into the Tory party. It will come down to who is left. And you're going to get fights in the parliamentary party, the non-parliamentary party, and the non-parliamentary party is going to be, I think, the interesting one to watch, just as what is left of the parliamentary party could be interesting to watch as well. But again, it depends who's left. If it is mostly radicalized populist right wingers and Farage wins in Clacton, which again I worry about, but he may pull it off. He may pull it off. It's not 100% certain, but it's not 50% either. So we wait and see what could happen there. So again, just something, of course, to sort of worry about there. Anyway, now on to Poland, because I think he's got a very good, interesting take on this. So perhaps the most striking aspect of the Polish coverage of the UK elections is that there is so little of it. Despite being one of the largest economies in the world, a NATO ally, and a home to as many Poles as some of the largest Polish cities, Britain has quite astonishingly now disappeared from the news horizon. Donald Trump versus Joe Biden, sure. Emmanuel Macron's gamble in France, up to a point. But the UK general election, not so much. Some of that is due to Poland's extremely polarized domestic politics, especially so. Poland is still dealing with the fallout of getting rid of their far-right government, and you've got Donald Tusk, sorry, and his coalition still trying to clean up all that mess. There are a lot of stories coming out of them going after people in that party and prosecuting them, and all kinds of weird and wacky stories coming up of them. Two people having to run to I forget it now, because Poland's got I think it's a prime minister and a president. Donald Tusk is Donald Tusk is the prime minister, not the president. I might have got that wrong. I can't remember now. And these two people went running to the president to try and claim asylum because they were being well, they claim they were being set up, but they were responsible for setting up a massive or concocting a massive corruption scandal to try and get rid of a political rival in their own coalition at the time. Again, Polish politics at the moment, very wacky and crazy going on there. I would love to try and get someone to sort of explain just what's going on over there. But yeah, kind of wacky stuff going on at the moment in Poland. So back to this. So there is obviously currently very little bandwidth for international news or anything other than currently the war in Ukraine and the Moscow-induced migration crisis on Poland's eastern border with Belarus. But certain change of government in London is now seen as primarily through that lens. Will a Labour-led Britain still support a free and independent Ukraine and NATO's pardon me, and NATO's defence of the eastern flank? Yes, we can certainly see that will be the case there. So for all the criticisms of the Conservatives domestically, both Boris Johnson and Rishi Sunak did make the UK seem an important, reliable ally. Some in Poland do vaguely recall Labour's very ambiguous defence policy during the Jeremy Corbyn years and want clarity on what, if anything, would change under Keir Starmer. Nothing? Great. There's not much else to really see here then. And like I say, there isn't too much going to change. Supporting Ukraine, being sort of, making sure that NATO's eastern flank is secure, is right. Nothing really is going to change. The Poles don't really care, I think, at this moment, other much than that, as was said here. They've got a lot of their own internal domestic stuff going on at the moment. So after the astonishment at the descent of the UK, now once seen as a paragon of political stability and common sense, into absolute utter chaos during the Johnson and Truss years, Poles have become, pardon me, so inured to the unusual of things happening in the UK that paradoxically, the unusual no longer seems that unusual. Brexit now seems largely consigned to history, primarily seen as a cautionary tale for anyone thinking they could follow the same path. There is some surprise that despite growing signs of regret, there is now very little movement to reverse the decision. Similarly, the unexpected re-emergence of Nigel Farage as a political player and almost certainly existential challenge to the Conservative Party are both noted. Mostly, of course, a political anecdotes or even trivia. Britain is now no longer considered a tempting place to live. In fact, Poland's Prime Minister Donald Tusk recently made a very specific political point at Britain's expense. On the 20th anniversary of Poland's accession to the EU, he promised that Polish GDP per capita would surpass Britain's by 2029. It's better to be in the EU, he declared. And again, we've seen that happen. Poland used to be almost, in many cases, again, for economic reasons, but Poland's really, really, really been, over the past, decade, if not more, a big economic success story. They've really managed to turn their economy around. An ex sort of, communist nation coming out that has been quite a really big success story. I think it's something that should be definitely celebrated in Poland achieving that. But I think even if we were to ever re-enter the EU, I do not think we would see the type of movements that we saw of Polish people anymore. I think that is over. I think the more Poland's economy sort of becomes better and stabilized, the more it is better to seen as a place to stay. And you see that problem. I went a couple of years ago to Romania, and I told people one of the big things that there was a business guy who was there. He said the biggest thing, the problem that he saw was you had Romanian youth who would go and either study in Romania or they go get degrees elsewhere, but they wouldn't either come back to Romania to use those degrees, or they would take the degree and go somewhere else. So that was a big problem for Romania's economy, sort of trying to sort of keep people there themselves in Romania so that they can use that to sort of improve the economy. I've talked about this before that, we should be, because we have a lot of international students, offering them citizenship. If you want to come here, you want to get these degrees, put it to use here, makes sense for them to do that. But of course, you can't. But anyway, so back to this. There are still, of course, enough reasons for Poles to actually care about who runs Britain, particularly, of course, now with the spectre of Trump and Marine Le Pen focusing their minds on international affairs. However, the contrast with now previous campaigns could not be starker. So Poland paying attention, but not so much. More concerned with continuity, really, with the defense stuff with Russia. Austria interested by what's going on with their own, ascension of their own far right. Maybe that will become, something that will be concerned in here. I wouldn't be surprised if you saw Nigel Farage maybe flirting with the Austrian far right, if not maybe in the near future if he does win. Italy apparently finds it largely boring, but there you go. Spain, again, lamenting almost, the UK in many way here, the Britain no longer being in the UK. So that's kind of sort of reassuring, but there you go. Well, and I mean that in a good way. A lot of people said, "Oh, you'll never be welcome back," but there's been plenty of times where we've seen that play out through all kinds of stuff. And then, of course, Germany worried about, their own, political problems over here, and seen as sort of, well, Britain's now throwing off its, shall we say, far right flirtation to sort of go over to Labour and seeing what happens. So it says here, boring is good in Germany. It is the ultimate German virtue. So, hey, I do hope so. I do hope our politics does become a lot more boring, purely because it will really help a lot with stability. And I keep on saying this: you are not just electing someone to be prime minister. It goes for who's going to be on the front benches, who's going to be in the committee rooms. It's going to affect a ton of stuff, and we are going to see a lot of change and transitions take place, possibly the next 4 or 5 weeks. So again, interesting times certainly ahead, but an interesting view around there. And if you are German, Polish, Austrian, etc., do you agree with those people's views of the UK elections? Maybe you're watching a bit closer than they are. But hey, I'd be very interested to see if you are from Europe and you are, again, someone else watching this. What's your take on the UK election so far? What do you think of all this compared to your own country's politics? I'd be very, very interested to know what you have to say on that. So do put a comment down below. And of course, as always, thank you very much for watching. And of course, we'll see you all next time.